You know, I was giving examples of how many have read the book West Point Way of Leadership? Yeah. Almost, okay. And Jeff over here is an Annapolis grad. And tomorrow we have a West Point professor coming to chat with everybody.
From Joseph's School, 30 minutes from here. He's one of his black belts and is a professor here.
But what I find we do a lot of times is we'll spend a lot of time on technical, marketing and sales, but then the whole culture of the school isn't congruent with what they're trying to change, right? And it's really getting, and the example I was using before is we have some of the guys who have like the crisis of the day, but it's always like crazy little stuff that really should be taken care of by the culture rather than taken care of by World Book and all that kind of stuff.
But I'm gonna, some of you may have heard a little of this from me in the past, but I'm going to talk a little bit about, I think, what we're missing in society in general and how important it is for people. I went out to Oregon to speak at one of the schools, and when I talked to the people, the families, especially the mothers and fathers, the caretakers for the kids, I talked to them about how important this is to our general society. And I can't be any stronger in my thought process than to say that this, what you guys do on a daily basis, is probably needed more today in our country than anything ever before. And I say that because in the political arena right now in the country, we're seeing a lot of polarization, we're seeing a lot of differences, but it's not, we just don't have differences where we have a difference of opinion. We have disrespect, we have verbal attacks, we have assaults. And I say that because the one thing that the martial arts teaches, or should teach, it taught me for sure, was discipline and respect for others. And, how to fix verbal disputes and things like that by the teachers that were in the schools teaching every day. That's sort of what I learned. And I learned sort of the hard way. I tell a story. Y.J. Chang was one of the grandmasters that really were the original guys that came into this country to start teaching Taekwondo with John Reed and a couple others. Well, he was my instructor in Paterson, New Jersey, which isn't far from here. And I remember I saw him downtown Paterson one day. I was in the school for about 4 months. I'm hanging out in the street, walking down the street. I see him. I said, "Hey, Master Chang." I waved, and I took about 3 steps, and he screamed at the top of his lungs, and we're in downtown Paterson. It's an open street. "Come here, come." Hey, what's this? Get down. I was in the middle of the street in Paterson, New Jersey, doing push-ups until I couldn't do anymore. And he said, "You have to show respect all the time, not just in school, but all the time." And I bring that up because it's a part of the culture you teach, and I really believe it's a part of the culture that has to be taught today, especially. We have kids that they don't understand respect. They don't have discipline. And I blame the parents. I've written about this, a number of articles, where I think parents are not doing the job parents should be doing. I was and I am super hard on my kids. have a daughter that's heading out to Michigan State University in a few weeks. I'm scared to death. You know, it's killing me that she's going. But she wants to go. I have a 33-year-old son that's a cop, and I did an interview the other day talking about the differences. It's easy with my son. Sit up, put your hand down, do this, do that. Don't do this. He gets pissed, he gets angry, he's upset. I don't care. If my daughters, either one of the two of them, if they just have a tear in their eye, it feels like somebody's ripping the heart out of my chest with a spoon. So it's a little difficult to, you can't discipline girls like you do boys, at least in my book I can't. But I will tell you.
Except for the martial arts.
No, except for the martial arts, and I can tell you that my daughters are 15 and 18 years old, and it's yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. So much so that my youngest daughter, who now is 15, when she was 9 or 10 years old, she used to yes ma'am a teacher in her school who actually thought that she was in some way mocking her. And pulled my daughter aside and said, "Why do you keep saying that?" She might say, "What? Yes ma'am and no ma'am. Why do you do that?" She said, "I do it out of respect for you." Oh, okay, go sit down. You know, well, that's pretty embarrassing. And there's something else that I want you to think about for a second, especially the older people in this room. You will understand what I'm going to say. The younger people may not get it, but take it from me, you know, and these guys, especially him, because he's really old. So I want you to look at the internet today and go on the internet and look at things that are classified as acts of kindness, right? How many do you see now? You see a lot, right? Acts of kindness. Well, you know, an old lady's trying to get up some stairs, she has some bags, and a young kid runs down the stairs, grabs her bags, picks them up, carries them up the steps. And there's an actual video, it makes news. There was an act of kindness. Okay, now that it seems funny, especially to people like me and older people. That should be the norm. Years ago, that was the norm. Years ago, if that woman was trying to get up the steps and my father saw me walk by her and not help her, I'd get a foot in my behind. It wasn't an act of kindness, it was something I was supposed to do. Today, it's like an anomaly if, God forbid, somebody helps somebody out. That's embarrassing. That's the stuff that you guys in this room and in various martial arts schools, that's what you're teaching, that's what you should be teaching your students. Because I promise you, it's not being taught at home. Last week, I was in Washington, D.C. at the White House, and I spoke at an event for a Turning Point. It's a big conservative political PAC. And I spoke about terrorism and national security, but I was actually speaking to 800 teenagers. There were 800 teenagers that came from all over the United States to go to this thing, this forum. And I spoke to them, and I realized most of them in this group were respectful, they were courteous, they were outgoing, really kind of mature for their age. But I'm also seeing 1,000% the opposite of that. And unfortunately, I'm seeing the opposite of that in much bigger numbers than the prior. You know, my daughters have kids that come to my house, young girls, teenage girls. I don't, if they were my kids, I don't know what I'd do with them. I mean, I'd lock them in a closet or something. I don't know. Disrespectful to the parents. I hear them on the phone talking to their parents. And it's kind of comical because my daughters are looking at me thinking, ooh, boy, would I be in big trouble. That's right, you'd be in big trouble. So I can't stress enough how important it is for you guys to be teaching in your schools things that should really be taught at home, because in today's day and age, I don't know if it's political correctness. I don't know what the problem is, but I do know that kids aren't being taught like I was taught when I was young, or like these guys were taught, because they're older, like me. Today it's just not being taught. Huh? He's old, right? He's really old.
They like to keep me around so they have to look at it.
So I think a part of the culture in this arena, and I've said this for years, going back to, you know, when I sort of became known in the international news arena. If it wasn't for this, if it wasn't for the martial arts and the military, those two things, I don't know where I would be today, because they sort of molded me into the person I am, and it's really helped my career, my kids, and many of the people that have worked for me over the years. So I can't stress that enough.
Well, what are some of the elements of, well, let's talk about the military since we're at the Premier Academy for the Army. What are some of the elements of the military that martial arts schools should bring to the
I think it's the discipline process. You know, just teaching a couple things. What time's your class? Your class is at 7 p.m.? Huh?
Yeah, 1 o'clock.
Yeah. No. Sometimes, you know, you got to start fresh. Kids coming into the schools, you know, what time is your class? What do you do first? What are you going to do second? You know, the discipline process is something that in the military, you know, for the people in here that are veterans, you know, from the time you step off that bus at a boot camp, you're getting a bird's eye view of what discipline really is. Some kids, they don't get that bird's eye view at all. So I think a part of what the military brings and what the martial arts should help them with is discipline. A lot of these kids, and I see it, I've seen it at his school actually, at the Virginia school, where parents have come back to Grandmaster Smith and said, you know, my kid's been here 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, and he's completely changed. He's changed in school, he's changed at home, as a result of the martial arts school. Why? Because they're getting discipline and getting to understand what that is and what it means. And that's, you know, the military is notorious for it.
some of the things that I always notice, and then Master Smith and I both lack the military background. I had wanted to go to Air Force Academy, and I sometimes regret that I didn't. But I had a pretty good path to the Junior Institute too. But one of the things that I see, especially here, but there's such an anchor with what West Point calls a long gray line. You know, the history, the lineage, what's come before. And, you know, as the commissioner of the NYPD, I mean, no police department in the world probably has more built-in culture, history, legends, internal stories. How do you go about really anchoring that in, and how valuable and important is that?
It's extremely important, and I think there's something that gets lost in martial arts schools. And when I went out to Oregon, I saw something that I really liked. You know, it's a present day school, but they were teaching a lot of history. They're talking a lot about the history of jiu-jitsu and judo, and the you know, where that stuff come from. There's history, Master Joe from Korea. There's history from Korea and Japan that sort of gets lost sometimes in the martial arts schools because nobody's focused on the long-term culture and history of where this stuff came from. I'm not a big proponent of really commercialized schools. I would try to be as traditional as possible. I would try, because that tradition brings with it discipline, respect, and things that, you know, historically, look, if you go to Korea tomorrow, and you go to Kukiwon, or you go to one of the major Taekwondo schools in Seoul, they teach no different than they taught me in 1974, 5. Same way today. Uniforms may be a little different. The students may have a little longer hair than they had when I was there. There may be some cultural differences, but the respect, the discipline, the method of teaching is as traditional today as it was then. I think that's extremely important. That, you know, listen, when you go to West Point, and I want to give you a heads up to Master Oliver, I'm going to be spending a lot of time at your house in Colorado because my 15-year-old is applying for the U.S. Air Force Academy.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I don't know if she'll get in. I pretty much think she'll get in, but
I have plenty of square footage. He
I
has a room, you can have a room.
know. I'll be hanging.
We got a couple motorcycles there too, so.
Yeah, we got plenty of vehicles.
So anyway, so that I think the culture and the long-term history of what you teach and where it came from and how and why, I think that's a part of what should never be lost.
Now, I'll nitpick with you with language. From commercialization, I'm going to interpret what you mean is repackaging everything to try to look slick and palatable to the audience, as opposed to being commercially viable.
Right.
So, you know, what you see in Colorado when we do the black belt retreats is, you know, not what most people picture as commercialization. Right. Keeping them up all night, working them to the bone. The misnomer I see happens many times, and it's pervasive in the U.S. right now. And part of what I didn't like about being an open tournament promoter is in that environment, an awful lot of people had thought, well, you know, the open tournament circuit and all of that stuff is really what it was about. Well, no, that's not at all what it's about. It's about developing discipline and good people and quality students and keeping the lineage. To me, the reason I've always wanted to be good at marketing is so I could be selective in who I talk to, right? And so I didn't have to worry about making sure that people were going to adapt to what we were teaching, because if they didn't, you know, there's other places they could go, right? But I think paradoxically, well, you would expect it, but some place like West Point is much more in demand because it's unforgiving, right? And the local community college is very flexible, but doesn't have a lot of, you know, people they're not begging to get in, right? They're not turning down. I mean, Air Force is probably what 1 out of 50 apply, get in. You know, I mean, the acceptance rate is really low relative to the number we want to get in on. You know, all the top 10 schools, but certainly the 3 military academies. But is that a fair? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When you look at, and I know it's a little different. If, like with NYPD, you kind of step into something that's a machine that's been going for years, right? But if you're a new person coming in and you're getting now, I'll use my language, socialized into that culture, you're getting brought into that culture. What are some of the indications that create the glue to keep that organization so tight? You got what? How many uniformed police officers?
I had 55,000 total, 41,000 uniform, 14,000 civilians.
Big organization. And that's kind of like the battleship, and it's going, and you try to steer to the top. But what are some of the traditions that are important for maintaining that cohesiveness? Because every cop on the beat isn't pulling out the rule book every 5 minutes to figure out how to behave.
Listen, yeah, I know you've heard the term, excuse my language, shit rolls downhill, right? Okay, it's all about leadership. It's all about the top. It's all about the number one person. And I'll give you a,
We got paper pads.
no, this is a true story. I took over the NYPD. Before I was the police commissioner, I ran the New York City jail system, Rikers Island. So in running Rikers, I had 13,000 people that worked for me. I go to the NYPD, my first day there, I take over the NYPD. Now I have 55,000 working for me. And you're sitting at Teddy Roosevelt's desk, literally. His desk sits in that office. So I walk into the office, and they, you know, some city councilmen, some people sent gifts for my appointment. And one of the gifts was an elephant-eared plant, right? And I like those. I have one or two of those in my house. I like them because they're nice, they're pretty, they're big, and you don't have to mess with them. Water them once a month or something, and they never change. They're always gorgeous. It's like they almost look plastic, right? So I walked into my office, and I said to one of my sergeants, my protocol sergeant that comes to my office, I said, "Hey John, where'd that plant come from?" He said, "That's from somebody." He told me who it was, and he says, "Is it okay there?" I said, "No, I love those plants." I said, "I love those plants." And it was pretty, it was big, had a bow on it. Okay, that's all I said. I love those plants. So the day goes on, it's my first day, it's a Monday. The day goes on, I go out to go to the mayor's office around 1 o'clock. When I come back to my office around 2:30, 3 o'clock, I walk in. It's like a jungle. There's plants all over my office, the same exact plant, just like that. They're everywhere. They're like in every corner next to my desk. There's like, it's gone from 1 to like 9. So I'm like looking around the room, and I step out the door. I said, "John, come here for a second." I said, "Where did this come from?" He said, we had guys go around the building, grab them and bring them up. I said, "From where?" He said, "I don't know, from other offices." I said, "For what?" He said, "You said you like it." I said, "John," I said, "I like that." I didn't say go steal everybody else's. I like the plant. He said, "No, I just thought you liked them, so we would, you know, we'd make it nice." I said, "No, okay, make it unnice. Take them back wherever they came from. Leave the one I got. That's fine." The reason and that's a true story, the reason I tell you that is leadership is extremely important, extremely important. And as a leader, you're followed in everything you say and do. So when people ask me about leadership, what is it? Leadership is, 1, leading by example. Holding people accountable for what they're supposed to be doing. How do you motivate as a leader? You know, what motivates people? What motivates people? What motivates?
Leading by example.
Leading by example. What else? Anybody?
Treating them as you would have them treat you.
Treating people as you would want somebody to treat you, yeah.
Recognition.
Huh?
Recognition.
I'll give you a couple. What he just said. Recognition. Well deserved, you're recognizing somebody. You're taking care of them. Okay? You know, we are, especially in this environment today, we're extremely quick to crucify and to punish, and sometimes, and quite often, over-punish. But a lot of times, we don't give incentives for good behavior. You have to do that. The other thing that motivates that people don't, I think sometimes they don't think about or they don't realize, fear. Fear is an enormous motivator. You ever read stories in the media where, you know, some kid gets hit by a car and some guy like goes over to the car and lifts it by himself? Or 2 people lift the car up and they get the kid out from under the car. Under normal circumstance, guarantee you they probably couldn't do that. It was the fear that drove them to do it. Somebody's fearful of losing their job. You know, I once had a thing in the NYPD where I came to find out there's in the New York City Police Department, there's 7 different bureaus. You have the Detective Bureau, they're responsible for all the detectives, the Organized Crime Control Bureau, there's narcotics, vice, all that stuff. The Patrol Bureau, the Internal Affairs Bureau. Well, what I realized when I first took over the NYPD is that every one of those divisions, those bureaus, every single one of them had their own database. And every other bureau didn't have access to it. So the narcotics division could be doing narcotics work and come across some homicide stuff that these guys in the detective division, they actually have the answers for. It's in their databases. They know who the suspects could be, but they don't communicate. They don't talk because they're fearful this guy may do something that we're supposed to be doing. So instead of communicating together, they stay separate and apart, and they lose information, basically. I brought all the bureau chiefs in one morning, and I said, okay, here's the deal. That person, one person, is going to be a coordinator, and we're going to take every database in the NYPD, and we're going to merge it into one. And you have 90 days to do it. Day 91, if it's not done, every bureau chief is fired. Took about 70 days. 70 days to merge every one of the databases into one centralized database. And what happened? We closed out like 35 homicides that could have been closed out. We could have identified suspects long before that, but they weren't communicating. Closed out 35 homicides, closed out a bunch of burglaries, robberies, all this other stuff. What was the motivator to make them get this done so quickly? Fear. Fear. You're gonna lose your job. So all this stuff, leadership is extremely important. And I think most importantly, the number one thing for me in leadership is you've got to be fair, but firm. You know, just like you guys running your schools. You're running your schools, you have instructors that work for you. You have to be very firm on what you want. Make sure they get the direction you want them to go in. And you gotta be fair. You know, you don't have to crucify people as punishment. You don't have to destroy their careers. You know, we live in a society today, and I think it's just the political correctness. You see somebody that makes a statement that somebody else considers it's racist or it's sexist or whatever. One statement. The person made one public statement. What happens? They lose their job completely, like they lose their job. And nobody will go near them again, ever. They won't touch them because of that one thing. You ever hear the term, the punishment has to fit the crime? Okay. We have to scale it back a bit, especially on people that say stupid things or do stupid things. You know, don't punish someone so bad that you destroy them, their families, their livelihoods. I don't believe in that. And I think it's wrong when we do it. And these days it seems to happen every day. We do it all the time. So that's something you may want to think about.
But we're definitely in the environment that we built even to prove innocence.
Oh, forget it. Forget it. Today, you just have to look like you did something wrong. And especially if, and here's our biggest enemy. That's our biggest enemy. It's your biggest enemy in your school. You know, these scare the hell out of me because we live in this environment where people destroy other people for sometimes just stupid things. Somebody makes an idiotic comment about somebody or something, and the next thing you know, it's like 1 million hits on YouTube, and you, your family, your kids, you're destroyed. And I think that's wrong. You know, and lastly, I'll touch on this, and this is why it's so important for you guys to focus on the younger generation. You know, when I was a kid, you were allowed to be a kid. You were allowed to be a child. You know, you went to school, you played rough, you got in scraps, you were a kid. You were like a young kid. Today, our young kids can't be young kids in school. God forbid a first grader goes up to somebody and goes, "I'm bound." He gets suspended. I mean, it's bizarre. To me, it's kind of insane. I don't know who's, you know, you're going to destroy this. And what's even worse, and I only found this out in talking to some state educators in New Jersey, that 6-year-old kid that got suspended because he pointed his finger in the form of a gun to some other kid, that stays in his educational records forever. Really? That's nuts. It's just nuts. But you have people out there that are doing this. So that's another reason it's so important for you to talk to your younger kids about things they should and should not be doing. Because today, kids are not allowed to be kids.
There was the kindergartner who got sexual harassment expulsion for hugging.
Right. Yeah, a male hugs a girl, you know, kindergarten. You know, it's a sexual harassment thing, and it gets suspended from school. You know, I don't know. I just think it's we've hit a point of stupidity in society that I don't know how to overcome it. I don't know how to get around it, and I don't know if it'll ever go back to the norm, back to reality.
Like you were saying, similar age group. When we were a kid in middle school, I grew up north of Detroit. And then we fought at the school ground. We wrestled outside. It was a way of establishing the pecking order.
Right.
And if you got your butt kicked, you either stayed away from each other or you made friends, and that was the end of it. Not a gang coming back to you later with knives, guns.
Well, you got the gangs. You got a group of kids coming back to settle a score where that didn't happen in the past. But what's worse is now they lock them up. They lock them up. 12-year-old kids. They get in a fight at school. They arrest them. They arrest them. They send them to family court with a criminal record that lasts with them forever. There's something wrong with what's going on in society today. And like I said, I don't know if we're going to be able to reverse it and take it back a notch or where it was. But it's pretty scary, especially for somebody like me. I've got 2, 3, 4 grandkids, with another one on the way. It's scary because they're going to have to live in this environment.
Absolutely not. What were some of the key elements? I mean, probably your first big success story was turning around the prison system, and it's really present in the news right now how much it's regressed to back before you got there. What were some of the things that you did with just to change all the norms and get them straight down?
Rikers Island is the largest jail system, one of the largest jail systems in the country. When I had it, we brought in about 133,000 inmate admissions per year. We averaged about 150 stabbings and slashings per month. And I'm talking like, you know, 2 guys hold a guy down on the ground and they take a turkey bone, a sharpened turkey bone, and they carve their initials into a kid's back and give him 180 stitches. That stuff went on every single day 3-4 times a day, all month long. In the 6-year period that Giuliani and I were together and I ran Rikers, I dropped the violence by about 93%. In the month that I became police commissioner, we had 1 incident. And I was having a heart attack. I was telling the chief, I'm going to fire everybody. For that 1 incident, you know, we went from 150 a month to 1. And there was a big change. But it was as a result of everything I just mentioned. Leadership, discipline, accountability, internal management, you know, making sure that the inmates were accountable for their actions. Historically, inmates did that stuff all day long, and nobody ever charged them with a crime. Yet if you went out in front of this hotel and you did that, there would be 20 charges. Possession of a weapon, assault, violent assault, conspiracy, intent to murder, like all kind of stuff. Because they were doing it in jail, nobody's charging them criminally. Until I came in. And I said, listen, anything you could do on the outside, if you do it inside, you get charged. So we started charging these guys with crimes inside. So you have a guy that gets locked up on a misdemeanor possession of drugs, but he's a badass, and he goes around like throwing feces and urine in people's faces. Okay, well, outside that's a crime. So inside it's a crime too. Nobody charged him, so I started charging. And, you know, looking for weapons. Letting the inmates know, 1, you're going to be held accountable for your actions, but 2, and more importantly, the managers, letting them know that they're going to be held responsible for what goes on in their facilities. So it's a twofold process. It's, you know, and management is the same. I don't care if you're running the New York City jail system, the NYPD, Amazon, or your school. Management is all the same. It's all about leadership and accountability. So, you know, I was very aggressive. You know, Rikers turned around. When I left, it was the most efficiently run large jail system in the nation, and that's not coming from me, that's coming from the American Correctional Association. Every organization looked at it, even the New York Times, which is kind of wild. The New York Times talked about its, you know, the renaissance of Rikers. Today, and this goes to show you the differences in leadership. Right now, Rikers has less than half the inmates I have. On a daily basis, we had 22,400. Right now, they have about 9,000 inmates. They actually have more violence today than they did when I was there, which to me is completely absurd. My chief of staff, he constantly sends me articles that he sees in the papers today, and he'll say,
Is that Jimmy?
John, he says, if that was us and we had 9,000 prisoners, he said it'd be like a part-time job. We spend half the time at the beach, just hanging, chilling, not doing nothing. But they have half the inmates, and the system is completely out of control because they've lost. They eliminated the programs that I put in place, and the thing went downhill. So you can see where management and accountability works. You could also see where the lack of management and accountability fails.
You know, and one of the things that I want to circle back to the plant story for a second, but then we're doing a different topic, is the plant story. I think so many school owners think that everybody's going to behave the way they tell them to, and forget they're going to behave the way they behave. Right? It's so common. I showed up at one of our franchises actually, but showed up to help him do some staff training. And I remember vividly, when he said he was going to pick me up, he showed up 20 minutes late. The staff meeting is supposed to show up at 10. It started at, he and I walked in at 10:30. And he said, you really got to teach them about how to be accountable and how to be responsible. And I was like, I can't teach them anything. The problem is they're just doing what you do, you know. Right. Talk about some of that, because the eyes are on you every minute of the day when you're in charge.
Yeah, well, listen, in the NYPD, you have a lot of eyes on you. You have the national press, you have the international press. In the New York City Police Department, you actually have what they call a press shack. You actually have an office in the headquarters. It's a big office, about the size of this. And it's loaded with New York City reporters. The New York Daily News, New York Times, Post, you know, they all have 3 or 4 reporters, all in that office. So whatever goes on in the building, whatever goes on in the streets, they're listening to scanners. So you're dealing with that. Plus, you have a command staff of about 25 direct reports that report directly to the police commissioner. And they're watching every move you make, and how you make it, and why, and all this other stuff. So it's extremely important. You know, in your arena, in schools, your instructors, your black belt instructors, they're going to mimic whatever you do. They're going to watch and they're going to mimic whatever you do. They're going to do what you do. You know, my father used to say, don't do as I say, or don't do as I do as I say. All right. Well, the easier way to get somebody to do the right thing is you do what you're supposed to do, and then I'll do what you do. Right. You know, because it's easy to get out there and say a bunch of stuff and then not focus on it, not do it. That's not what anybody, you know, you don't teach leadership and management like that. When I was the police commissioner, I was shadowed by the New York Times for about a week. And they wrote this big piece about, you know, my character, my personality, things that I did. But one of the things that came out of that article, Giuliani, the Mayor Giuliani actually called me over to City Hall, and he was laughing at the article. He said, do you really like walk around headquarters and look at the lights out? I said, it's not that I walk around headquarters looking for lights out. I said, but if I'm walking around headquarters and there's a row of lights out and I see it, then I want to know where's the bureau chief that works in this office that doesn't see all those lights out? Because I want to know, like, what do you see? Because the lights are out, right? They're out. Okay, how come I found it and you didn't find it? You work here. You're on this floor. You know, things like that. A bunch of different stuff like that. I would do all day long. I would see things that they didn't see. And then I would get in their case because they didn't see before I did.
That's what Tom Peters called UBWA, managing by walking around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so you got to do the same thing in your schools. Same thing. You know, you walk in and you see your black belt instructors doing, you know, whatever they're doing, but you see things in the school that aren't going right. You got to call them on the side and say, listen, you see this? I see it. Somebody else saw it. You didn't see it. You know, put them on the spot. You know, they got to be held accountable for what they're supposed to be doing.
But you've got to have constant awareness, right? But the two things that my staff would probably laugh about over the years was, if I walked into a school and there was fingerprinted mirrors, that just drove me nuts, right? So I would go in and clean the mirrors. Well, why did I clean the mirrors? Because the conversation I was going to have with them next is, I don't want to ever, front doors the same thing. You know, if the front doors look crappy or the fingerprint mirrors. The other thing was anybody being out of uniform, right? So I would inevitably walk into the school and pull the instructor off and say, why is that green belt over there wearing pink socks? What socks? Right there. He's wearing pink socks. Why do we have somebody in uniform wearing pink socks? Well, inevitably, they hadn't even noticed it, right? It's just stupid stuff like that. But it's amazing how if you're not running around pointing it out, they don't even know they're ignoring things.
Well, the other thing is, your instructors, you may watch your guys teaching, you may watch their classes, you may walk in on them. If they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, you gotta make sure they know it. You gotta reward good behavior. Like I said earlier, we are super quick to punish, quite often over-punish, but in many cases, we do not incentivize good behavior and reward good behavior. You gotta do it. And that comes in a number of different ways. Primarily, the first off is recognition, but you know, at the end of the day, you know, good behavior has to be rewarded. And I don't like to use this, you know, model, but how do you train a dog? How do you train a dog? Dog does something bad, they get a swat in the nose with a newspaper. Dog does something good, they get a treat. All right. You know, I know your black belt instructors on dogs, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing. You punish bad behavior, you hold people accountable, you reward good behavior, and incentivize good behavior.
You know, and it's so powerful for that to be unexpected too, right? There's, on the reward systems, I think a lot of times we build in, you do X amount of money, you get X pay, you do X amount of money, you get X pay, you do a certain number of this. But then we don't, I walk in and everything's going exceptionally well, and I buy your dinner. You know, I walk in, everything's going great, I give you a $100 bill. Everything's going exceptionally great. There's some other just random, unexpected. You know, I found with my staff that, you know, if he's making 12% of the gross, he did 100,000 that month, he got 12,000, he's excited about that, right? It keeps him excited, but on a personal basis, I came in and pat on the back and say, hey, why don't you take your girlfriend out for a steak dinner tonight, here's a couple $100.
Right.
That was in their memory 5 years later.
Yeah, but you know what that does? That does two things. You're rewarding that person, but it also sends a demonstration to the other people in the school, the other instructors, that there's a possibility that can happen. You know, I told you a couple minutes ago when I had these guys merge the databases. When they told me that centralized system was ready, it was about 75 days after I gave the order. They had 90 days, they got it up and running in 75 days. And I actually, this is true, what I'm going to tell you, I went into our you know, central command station where we were having this meeting. Now there were 100 commanders in this room. The guy that I put in charge of doing this transfer, he was what they call a deputy inspector. It's one rank above captain. He basically did his presentation. He did everything that I wanted. It all got done. They told me all these cases they closed out. And as he's talking to me, as they're briefing me, I whispered to my chief of staff, I told him to do something. He walked out of the room, came back in the room, and he handed me a shield. And the second the deputy inspector was done, I said, look, I don't normally do this. I said, because there's a process by which to do this. You know, our promotions in the NYPD are very ceremonial, they're very public, they're, you know, it's a big deal. I said, but I think today it's worthy. And I took that shield out, it was an inspector's shield, something like this without all the stars on it. I took out that shield and I said, effective right now, you're now an inspector in the New York City Police Department. Now, that guy was ecstatic. You know, it's a $12,000 a year raise. He gets a new shield. You know, he's going to go to the next promotion with his family. That didn't do anything compared to what it did to the other 100 people in that room. They went nuts. One, it had never been done before. Two, it's a sign that good behavior, good work gets rewarded in a very big way. So that was a big deal. Now I'll tell you one more thing and then I'll shut up. And this relates to setting examples, don't asking people to do something you wouldn't do, I became police commissioner in August of 2000. I guess it was the next year. I promoted a kid to detective second grade. He was a young guy, been on the job about 11 years. His name was Joseph Vigiano. He had been involved in 2 shootouts, and he was shot both times in the chest. He had a vest on, but both shootings he was shot in the chest, and in both shootings he killed the guy that shot him. He was shot a total of 5 times in the 2 shootouts. So in August of 2001, about 5 weeks before the World Trade Center attack, I called him down to my office and I promoted him to second grade detective. There's 3 grades of detective. There's 3rd grade, 2nd, 1st. So he was a 3rd grade detective. I promoted him to 2nd. And he was in my office and he's looking around, he sees some photos on the wall and he said, Commissioner, is that you? That's you rappelling out of that helicopter there? I said, yeah, I was, when I was young, I was on a SWAT team in New Jersey. And that's you on that building, jumping off the building? Yeah, that's me. He said, every week, the guys from emergency service, that was his unit, ESU, emergency service in the NYPD, it's called ESU. There's about 450 ESU cops. It's like a SWAT team. It's their SWAT team. But it's the biggest SWAT team in America, right? 450 of these guys that respond to all high-end stuff. Well, Joe says, Commissioner, every Saturday, a certain team, squads in ESU, we go down to the Brooklyn Bridge, and we walk up the Brooklyn Bridge for breakfast. You should come. I said, I should come. For what? Why would I go? He said, because it's fun.
On the top of the
So
Brooklyn
let me explain what this is. You guys go to,
crazy.
no, this is crazy. If you go to Manhattan and you get to look at the Brooklyn Bridge, or bring it up on your computer. You look at the Brooklyn Bridge, there's no elevator to get up to the top, okay?
And no stairs.
There's no stairs. There's only one way to get to the top of the Brooklyn Bridge. And that is, it's a pole about this wide. It's literally 18 inches in diameter. And you have to get up on that thing, and you have to walk on it like this. And the only thing you have to hold on to are these 2 metal railings that I swear they sway this much. The cables, right? So I said, Joe, what? I'm the police commissioner, I don't have to go up there. He said, oh, yeah, I know. He said, but you've done this already, and we have a great time, we go out for breakfast. And I said, well, that's all right. So he's on the way out of my office, he's walking out the door, he's ecstatic, he's getting promoted. And he looks back and he said, well, I just thought I'd ask. He said, we've asked the last, 5 police commissioners or something. He said, they never have the balls to go up there. I said, really? Okay, all right. So he walks out. I call my captain in charge of my security detail, in charge of the bodyguards. I said, who's working Saturday? He tells me the guy's working. I said, tell them bring their BDUs and their boots. We're going up on the Brooklyn Bridge. And the captain's looking, he's like, Commissioner, for real? I said, yeah. They go, all right. So Saturday, I go down to City Hall, all the ESU guys are there, and I get out of the thing. There's photos, if you ever look on my Facebook account, there's actually photos of me walking up the Brooklyn Bridge, and I get down there that Saturday morning, and I have BDUs on. I walk up, and there's a lieutenant, he looks like he just saw the devil himself, right? He's looking at me, he says, Commissioner, how are you? I said, good. I said, you got a harness for me, you got a rig? He goes, yes, sir, for what? I said, I'm going up on a bridge. He goes, really? And he's a lieutenant. He's Vigiano's boss. I said, Joe Biden. He goes, He did? I said, yeah. Joe invited me, told me, come down Saturday. We're going for breakfast, right? He goes, yes, sir. The lieutenant was having a heart attack, so I put the harness on. I'm shit with my pants. I get up on the thing. I start walking on the pole, and I walk all the way to the top of the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, I don't know what, I wasn't sure what he meant when he said breakfast, right? He said, we go up and have breakfast. I thought it was like a code thing, like it was like we have choir practice. You know, it's like choir practice is where a bunch of cops get together and go get drunk, right? So I thought like going to have breakfast was like a thing. What I did not know is that on the top of the Brooklyn Bridge, they had like, it was like a deli. They had like bagels and eggs and coffee and juice. And I'm like, how did you get all this stuff up? And they were like, in the morning, on the day of training, in that morning, they all flip coins to the last two guys who loses, and the last two guys, they have to load this shit on their back, and they gotta walk up on that bridge and take it all the way up. And they gotta load it up and bring it back. I said, this is crazy. So I went up the bridge, I came back down, and here's the moral of the story, and this goes back to what Steve was just saying. When I came off the Brooklyn Bridge, my chief of staff knew I was going down there. He did not know I was actually going to do it. He called me about 2 hours later, and he says, hey, Commissioner, were you up on the Brooklyn Bridge today? I said, yeah. He said, okay. He said, I've literally gotten 60 phone calls from union delegates in precincts all over the city. Now there's 76 police stations in New York, 76 precincts, and there's over 150 different commands other than that. He said, I got 60 calls in the last 2 hours saying that you wanted to know if it was true that you really went on top of the bridge. Why is that so important?
Leadership.
Leadership. What does it tell the rest of the cops? What is it, and these are union delegates. What's it tell them? I'm never going to ask them to do something I wouldn't do. So I did what they did. To this day, the guys that were with me up there, you know, we have like this special bond because, you know, I was one of them. Huh?
You're all crazy.
Yeah, they're nuts. I'm not nuts. I just did what they told me. The more, but you know, now there's a bad part of the story. The bad part of the story is 5 weeks after we went up there, we were attacked on September 11th, and Joe Viggiano was killed. He died along with his brother. There were two sets of cop firemen brothers that died on September 11th. Joe and John Viggiano died, and then the Langone brothers died. Everybody in here, you know Home Depot, right? The founder of Home Depot, his name is Kenny Langone. He's a very good friend of mine, multi-billionaire, of course. He was the founder.
New book out. I look out this.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, he had two nephews. One was in the police department, one was in the fire department. Both of them were killed as well. You know, it was tragic, terrible, it was a bad day for us. But Joe Viggiano was probably one of the most heroic cops in the NYPD ever. And it's a shame, you know, it took the buildings to kill him. But anyway, you know, I had my time, it was great. But I tell that story because there's nothing more important than the people that work for you knowing and understanding that you would do what they're doing. That you're never going to ask them to do anything that you would not do. There's nothing more inspirational to people that work for you than that. That's it.
You know, on the frontline level, we talk about this behind the scenes a lot. There's a lot of the martial artists we work with. It's kind of like they want, where's the script so I can teach my sales guy how to do the sales, because I don't know how to do it, but I don't need to know, I want him to do it, right? right? There's all kinds of examples of that. And, you know, our conversation behind the scenes is always, well, if the owner doesn't know how to do it, and then the owner doesn't go and model it, and the owner teaches them how to do it themselves, none of this works, right? And I mean, you can make the argument, of course, that, you know, Steve Jobs wasn't much of a programmer or one thing or another. But in our environment, if even a multi-school chain is small enough that if you don't know how every job is done well, right? I mean, you know, we had janitors, but I was better at cleaning the mirrors and a whole bunch of other stuff than anybody else because I knew I could tell them what I wanted done, right? And how to do it. I remember we were doing a lot of video, and I went and took a week of video editing classes. And the guy said to me, "Why are you here?" I said, "Well," he said, "well, you're not going to actually do any of this stuff." I said, "No, but I do a lot, and I want to know what to tell them to do and how it should be done and what good product is and so forth." And I think we miss that a lot of times. If you don't know what it's like the Walmart story of Sam Walton showing up at the loading docks and knowing how everything was done. If you're not there,
You know, I became the New York City Police Commissioner. My rise from cop to commissioner was sort of legendary in the NYPD. Nobody's ever done it. From the time I got sworn in and got a white shield, a cop shield, to the time I got this shield, it was just over 14 years. Nobody in the history of the department, 200-year history, whatever it is, nobody's ever done it. When I became police commissioner, there was a lot of speculation that I would not be looked at well by the upper echelon of the PD because some of these guys had 30, 35 years in the department, and I have now jumped them. And I was in charge. When the mayor asked me, he specifically asked me, Giuliani asked me, "How are you going to deal with that?" I said, "I'm not. I don't care." You know why I didn't care? One, because I'm in charge. And they're going to do what I tell them, whether they like it or not. But two, and more importantly, there's 400 basically commanders and above, captains and above. In the NYPD, there wasn't in my command, 400. But there were 40,000 cops. And you know what? Those cops were ecstatic that I became police commissioner. Why? Because I had done their job. I was a highly decorated cop. I was a really highly decorated detective. I had a bunch of medals. My medals came up to here. I earned the Medal of Valor. I've been in gun battles with, you know, my partner was shot and wounded. We had friends of mine killed. I was like a cop's cop. And now I'm the police commissioner, I'm the boss. So I know their job. I've done their job. I did it really well. And they know that. There's nothing better than that. And there's nothing better for me as the police commissioner to know their job. And I'll give you this one, a real life thing. One of my bosses from organized crime came in my office one day and he says, "Listen, we have a group of undercovers downstairs. There's two ways to get a detective shield in the NYPD. You become a cop, you jump on an investigative track like you work in a precinct, you walk a foot post, you go in a car, then you go to the squad, what they call a detective squad. You work in a robbery enhancement unit, they call it RIP unit. And then probably over 5 to 7 years after you start, you have a chance to get put on a list to get your detective shield, your gold shield, which is a promotion. There's another way to get a promotion. Second way to get a promotion, the fastest, is become an undercover narcotics. And the reason it's so fast is because one, it may not last for that long, a long time anyway. And two, it's extremely dangerous. I was an undercover narcotics. I had hair down to the middle of my back, my lower back. I had 7 diamond earrings. I had a goatee. Kind of looked like Charles Manson, according to my mother. If you're undercover narcotics, you only have to do it for 18 months, and you're guaranteed to get your detective sheet. But it's a bad, nasty job, because all you do is buy drugs. You wear no vest, you have no gun, you have no shield, you have no ID, you have nothing. For 18 months, your sole job in life is to buy drugs from bad guys. And you put yourself in a position where people stick guns in your face, they search you, they strip you. You know, you go into a crack den up in, well, this is back in the crack days. You go up in the crack den of Harlem, and you walk in, and they tell you, take all your clothes off and go in the next room. Take all your clothes off, go in the next room. The guy in the next room, he sells you. Then you come out and put your clothes on and leave. They want to make sure you're not wired. They want to make sure you're not carrying a gun. It's a nasty job. So when I took over as police commissioner, chief came in and he says, we have a group of undercovers downstairs. They're complaining about their equipment. I said, what equipment? He said, well, they're transmitters, they're wires, they're this. So I went downstairs to where this meeting was, and I stepped into a corridor to watch this meeting. It was in an auditorium, a small auditorium, maybe half the size of this. And I'm listening to what they're saying. And I'm listening, there are instigators. There's guys in there that's instigating the rest of the undercovers. And talking complete nonsense, like complete nonsense, stuff that they shouldn't even be concerned with. So I listened for about 15 minutes. And I walked into the room. Everybody stands up at attention. I tell them, sit down. I said, I was just sitting out there inside here listening to all you guys talk. I said, transmitters don't work. What? They transmit the Kells you wear. They're pagers. They're like, remember the old pagers years ago? Well, in the NYPD, they have pagers. Now they're phones. You could have a phone in your pocket. It transmits signals back to, the backup teams. They can hear what you're saying. If you have the phone in your pocket with the camera out like this, it's basically videoing everything that's going on to a team outside. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. The transmissions don't go through certain buildings. And I'm like, really? Like, that's what your complaint, that's your big complaint? Because when I was a cop, I didn't have that. I didn't have camera stuff. I didn't have anything. You walked into a building, you did your body, and you left. And you prayed and hoped that nothing went wrong while you were in there. Because sometimes, you go into a building up at Washington Heights, nobody will find you. I used to actually, when I was an undercover, Sharpie pens, the Sharpies, right? I would take a red Sharpie, a brand new red Sharpie, and I'd have it in my pocket. And when I walked in the building, I knew where I was going because they told me who was selling, right? We had these reports, and the reports would say, this address, apartment 5B, is doing crack, or cocaine, or heroin, or whatever. So I would have to go there. And I'd have to walk up to 5B, knock on the door, and say, look, I'm looking for something, right? So sometimes those apartments are the wrong apartment. Sometimes you get in the building, and somebody at the doorway would lead you somewhere else. So I had a red Sharpie, and I would take that red Sharpie out, and this is what I did. I just scribbled on the wall all the way, wherever I was. There was a red line to wherever I went in that building. It's not like you're in the, you're not in the Pierre
Not
Hotel.
in here.
Yeah, you're not in here in Pierre Hotel. These are decrepit buildings. But I would write on the wall to wherever I went, and when I got to the door, I had to be. I would write my initials, B. Okay. Like a graffiti artist, because there's tons of graffiti there anyway. But that way, when the team came in, they would know if I didn't show up in 5 or 10 minutes, they would know exactly where I was. They would boom the front door, look for the marks, follow the marks, get to where I was, and then drag me out of there if they had to. There's a reason I'm telling you this. Oh, the undercovers. So they were all complaining. So I said, okay, you, and you, the 4 instigators, I said, obviously you hate, I said, I heard all of you say that you hate being a UC. You're transferred. You're transferred. You're going back to your commands, or you're going wherever, but we'll take care of you. I know you hate it. It's really bad. You hate it. You're transferred. Okay, who else wants to get transferred? They're all sitting there looking at me like I got 4 heads. They didn't say a word. Nobody said a word. I said, listen, I get it. If you guys are afraid, you know, whatever, you let me know. And, you know, talk to the captain, and he'll take care of you. Any other questions? No, sir. Out the door I went. These guys got transferred. I never heard from them again. And all they talked about was, we shouldn't have listened to those nitwits. They got us in all kind of, you know, this is crazy. We shouldn't have listened to them. You'll have scenarios like that in your own schools, where you have people that, you know, they're just, you know, they're negative people. I'm super big on not transferring negativity. You'll hear people say, you know, quite often, you know, I fired this guy, or I took him out of this spot and I put him over here. I'm not big on that at all. If the guy can't do his job here, I'm not too sure he's going to be able to do the job over there unless it's a lesser job. So I'm not big on transferring stupidity or negativity.
Transfer them to a new career.
Yeah, let them find something else to do. It's like these guys. You don't like it? Okay, go somewhere else. You know, you don't like the job? Go.
How did you deal with opposition? People that were, there's an old saying, people convinced against their will is of the same mind still. And if you had those kind of individuals to where they were so rooted in their manner, and no matter what you said, they had a reason for what they were doing,
well, listen,
and would continue to do.
Some people, you know, they're just, you know, they're, from my perspective and what I've had to deal with, you know, it's usually like that in the public arena. It's the unions. The unions are like that. And I'll tell you one last story, because I know you guys got to get a break before you leave.
We don't give them breaks.
You don't give breaks? See, I would fire you. So I'll tell you, this is a real story. I got a phone call one time about 4 o'clock in the morning from my chief of staff when I ran Rikers. He calls me up and he says, Commissioner, we got a problem. He said, the union is at the Rikers Island Bridge. There's only one way to get on and off of Rikers. It's one bridge. He said, the union's at the bridge. It's 4 a.m. and they're stopping every bus that's going out to court. Now, there's 800 buses that leave Rikers, that left Rikers on a daily basis going to and from different courts, okay? They're stopping every bus. They're inspecting them for tires, tail lights, headlights, lamps, whatever. All these little nitpicking things, they're checking because the union president had a beef with the chief of transportation. I'm like, really? So I call the union president. I call him on his cell. He's out on the bridge. It's 4:30 in the morning. And he's telling me, hey, Commissioner, you know, I'm doing what I got to do. You know, the chief, he's harassing one of my guys. I said, all right, you do what you got to do. I called my chief of staff. I said, get all the maintenance people in and have them check the vehicles. So when I was on the phone with the union guy, with the president, he said, listen, you need to know what's in your policies and your, you know, your procedures manual. He said, because the procedures manual says that these buses have to have all working lights, has to have the tires certain specs, has to have this, has to have that. I said, all right, I got it. Go do what you gotta do. So I get the overtime people in, I get the maintenance guys in. Any buses that were down or had a problem, we were taking care of it. So we go through this whole mess, right? Backed up the courts, had to call judges. It was a big headache. Made the newspapers, you know, Rikers Island Union, closing down bridge. It was like a mess for like 3 days. I waited for about 9 weeks until Super Bowl Sunday, okay? On the Saturday night before Super Bowl Sunday, I called my chief of staff and I said, listen, at midnight, I want 6 captains from downtown, from headquarters, pick 6 really good captains and send them down to headquarters at midnight, at 6 a.m. on Super Bowl Sunday. So they all come down, they bring these captains in off duty, they have no idea what they're doing there. And I said, okay, listen, starting at 7 a.m., you're gonna call the Health Services Division every hour, on the hour, and you're gonna get a list of every correctional officer that calls in sick today. And they're gonna call in sick because they're either drunk or they're gonna get drunk because they're dealing with the Super Bowl. They're having a Super Bowl party thing. Now, the way this works is when you call in sick, the department is supposed to send somebody to your house to verify you're there, okay, if you're sick. There's also another rule in that policy and procedure book that says every off-duty correction officer in the department cannot be drinking to a position where he's inebriated, where he's drunk, especially when you call in sick. I suspended 35 people. I suspended 35 people in 16 hours. The union president went nuts. He was like nuts, screaming, like I could hear him screaming at my chief of staff, like from across the room on the phone. Crazy. So they transfer the call to me. I get on the phone, I said, hey, Norm. I said, listen, he said, this is personal, you made it personal, I know what you did, I know why you did it. I said, listen, all I did, I said, remember you told me to look in that policy and procedure book? I said, that's exactly what I did. I said, I had no idea you guys get inspected once a day. I didn't even know you weren't allowed to be drinking when you're like calling sick. I didn't know that. You told me to do it, I did it. He was nuts, he was outrageous. So I said, come down and see me. So he comes down Monday morning, comes to my office, walks in. I said, listen, don't ever do anything to me again. When you do something and go to the press before you tell me you have a problem, we'll get along just fine. You have a problem, and this goes to your question. You have a problem, you tell me. If I think it's real, I'll fix it. If I think it's BS, I'm going to tell you it's BS and why. I said, and you're not in a position to like threaten me, or you're not in a position to do anything about it. And here's why. You have 13,000 people for you, and they're not all angels. They're going to get in trouble. And when they get in trouble, it comes to my desk. And I can destroy them, which destroys you. That's how it works. And I did. That was my first year as commissioner. I was there 6. I never had a problem with him again, ever. And when I took over the NYPD, he literally went to the PBA president, the union president of the NYPD, which is the biggest police union in the country. And he said, Patty, it was Patty Lynch's name. Norm Seabrook said, Patty, all you got to do is be fair with this guy in school. He said, you tell him, you know, you give him a problem, he'll take care of it. You know, unless you guys an idiot. You guys an idiot, you got an issue. But that's the way I operated, and it worked out fine.
On that note, the bus is supposed to be meeting us like right now. So we should actually be on the bus for about 5 minutes, but let's be in the lobby so that you can get organized.
Thank you.